We are, did I not copy the stream key? Apparently we are not. Well, we are recording on Zoom, but I'm an idiot and didn't copy the stream key. So give me 1 second. Like I just told you, I'm all over the place. Good Lord in heaven.
Take your
Uh,
time.
thanks, brother. Yeah, and I don't know if I'm gonna be like throwing you into a. I decided where I was like, we're gonna talk about the psyops of psyops, like how to spot them. And then it dawned on me today. I'm like, I have no idea if you're like, I don't have the answer to that. Um,
We can talk about whatever you want, man.
Yeah, all right, let's start in three, two, one, and we are recording with Mr. Alex Newman on Monday, February 24th, 2025 at 12:04 p.m. Eastern Time. I was recommended to have you on by the one and only Dr. Peter Bregan, who's been on here a zillion times before, and I hold him very highly in my heart and mind. So if he said to have you on, I'm like, I'm gonna have you on. Um, But I kind of want to talk about because I know when I last spoken to him, the kind of the big thing in the news was the drone psyop and whatever that was, running the gamut from actual alien interactions, probably not, down to, I don't know, some DoD false flag to further erode our civil liberties, which unfortunately does seem to kind of be the Occam's razor. It's like it just no matter what the question posed is, you can kind of go, it's probably a DoD psyop to evade to erode our like what was an ice cream truck? Yeah, no, it's probably a DoD psyop to erode our civil liberties and hide a couple trillion more dollars. But Mr. Newman, please introduce yourself as I post around the live link.
Sure. Well, thanks very much, Tommy. Great to be
Sir.
here. And any friend of Dr. Bregan's is a friend of mine. I'm a journalist, and I've known Dr. Bregan for some years now. I think very, very highly of him. And I think we initially crossed paths exposing the COVID fraud, the injections, the psyops, the whole thing. And over the years, we have talked a lot about globalism, which is an area that I really focus on. I try to go to as many UN conferences as I can, try to expose what the globalists are doing with this push to create not just a police state in the United States, but a global technocratic control grid to basically take all of humanity down this road to tyranny. So that's what I do. Education is one of my big passions. I figure the most powerful tool in their arsenal is indoctrinating the next generation. And if we don't address that, everything else we're doing is for nothing. So,
It's just kind of funny that it's just like a nonchalant statement. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's trillions of dollars in a global cabal of intelligence agencies with literally unlimited money because they print it, and they're trying to usher us all into a technocratic hellscape that is truly an iteration of, I don't know, the Book of Revelations. That being said, it's kind of hard to like go from. I imagine it's like being the president. You get in, you sworn in, and they come in like, all right, we made alien contact 80 years ago. The Chinese are working with them, but we think they like us more. Now there's nukes hidden behind the top 50 cities in the world, and they've been there for about a century. That's actually how we discovered nuclear bombs. They might go off in any moment, but they haven't thus far. And you're just kind of sitting there like, yeah, and they're like, so, but you could have pet issues. Do you want to ban TikTok? You're like, man, I don't know, but. It does seem to me like, right? But it does seem to be like it makes sense from like a not a good sense. Like suspend morals and ethics. Just look at it like a psychopath would. Just look at this like a video game or something. If you were going to try to control the world, the natural resources, the flow of people, and as, you know, technology develops and society progresses, you know, you even just the last 120 years, you look at the change from like World War One to World War Two to Vietnam, Cold War, War on Terror to now, and the gradual change of the battlefield and the most effective use of time and energy is psychological operations, which it's you know, it's part of the times. You can't have, you know, a World War One until the Maxim machine gun's invented. In the same way, you can't have a primarily psychological landscape until there is true mass media, not FDR fireside chats, not TV. I mean true, like we're all terminally online. But once you do get to that hypersaturation, you don't need it you do need bombs and for when it goes kinetic and the veil falls off. But until then, I mean, soft power really is it's on you. Not, you mean Alex Jones hit it, you know, there's a war on for your mind, but that is what it is. And it so it's I'm less focused on the drones or COVID or whatever, and I have no idea how to, but it has been something I've been trying to do. Is like, how do we even spot psychological operations? Because that's you're never gonna stop them because it's the Pentagon with a zillion dollars, but the very least you can do. It's like spotting a scam artist or something. Hey, brother, you got change for 20? You're like, this is already get away from me. Uh, do you have any? I mean, again, and not that you have the, you're just like, I don't have the answer to this, man. But like, how would you just off the cuff? How would you deal with that?
Well, during the COVID scamdemic, I came up with a very simple saying. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. Once you figure out that they're trying to kill and enslave you, everything makes sense. And so, like, and nothing makes sense
Welcome
until
into
you
the Oval
understand
Office,
that.
Mr. President. I hope you enjoyed your inauguration. Once you understand that really the bankers are just trying to enslave and kill you, everything else we're about to tell you makes.
Right. And it sounds simplistic, but like it's the only way to make sense of all the stuff that's going on. And once you see everything through that lens, I do see things through that lens. I actually see things through a biblical lens, which I think the Bible presents it that way. You're dealing with forces from the pit of hell that hate humanity, that hate family, that hate liberty, that hate the rule of law, that hate everything that is good and decent and proper. Then suddenly it becomes, I think, easier to spot a psyop. Well, does this messaging tend to strike fear into people's hearts for the sake of striking fear into people's hearts? Does this messaging contribute to the seizure and the usurpation of more power by the state, the giving up of individual liberty and financial resources by the peasants, by the serf class? And so once you see stuff like that, I think it becomes pretty like with the COVID. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. It's just once you have this lens on through which you're looking at the world, through which you're looking at the media propaganda, it makes sense. I didn't have to wait to unravel every element of the COVID scam to know it was a scam. As soon as I turn on the TV and see, oh, you should be very scared. There's a new virus and people are dying and we need to, like, oh, okay, well, obviously this is a giant power grab and I don't need to know whether it leaked out of a lab or walked out of a lab or was really, it's obvious what's going on here. This is a psyop to terrorize people for the purpose of stealing our money, advancing the cause of one world economic, political, and even religious tyranny. And so it's very easy, I think, to spot these. And you may not be able to always unravel all the details of every single one. Which particular government agency is running this one? Is it the CIA or the DoD? Really, it's not all that essential to understand. But as soon as you see them, for example, pumping out fear porn with the objective being take away your freedom, further empower the government, it's obvious you're dealing with a psyop. And of course, there's going to be some truth to these narratives. It wouldn't be a very effective psyop if there wasn't some strand of truth woven into it. Yes, maybe there's a virus. Yes, maybe this medicine will or won't work. So there's always some truth woven into it. But I think once you have that general formula, once you have those lens through which to see the narrative, it becomes much easier to spot it.
Yeah, it's kind of understanding, the doctrine. It's like looking back, I was a biology major, looking back into like evolutionary biology, genetics or something. Once you understand like the real thesis of organic life, which is reproduce, and reproducing means get resources to reproduce and don't die. So defense and then, the soil to grow, literally and figuratively. Once you understand that, everything else makes sense. You get a multicellular life and like tapeworms all the way up to, mammals with trillions of cells and tissues and then even higher levels of complex human society and psychology and everything. We're doing a podcast. It's primarily audio. It's like, well, and I'm not, you and I aren't physically together. Like, why does it matter that I shower? Why does it matter that I shave and put on a clean shirt? And you're like, I don't know, I want to look presentable. What is presentable? Really, not me, but I mean, like, what is presentable really? And it's like, well, sex sells. You have on a jacket. You're in an office, and it's like, once you look at that, then everything that even seems unrelated. I'm listening to a book on Steve Jobs right now, and so much of it, he's talking about like the iPhone, and it's like it's sexy, it's appealing. You go into all of that, and you're like, oh, it's all regeneration. Even series of phones, Marshall McLuhan, we are the sex organs of the machine world. Once you understand like the doctrine, attain resources, reproduce, don't die. Everything else falls into place. Now, obviously, once you get to higher consciousness and start to understand things like God and spiritual evil, that's then it starts to sort of deviate. You're like, well, why would that person do something that resulted in their death, or why does the dad work himself to death so that you can have a better life? Well, it's love and it's godliness, and that's a deviation. But once you kind of understand that they're trying to enslave you and kill you, and you can even go a little farther as like a subset and be like, and less rights for you and more money for them. You're like, oh, I get it. I mean, I remember I'm kind of proud of myself because I took the COVID thing hook, line, and sinker when it first started. Like first year, I was like, oh, we're all dead. Like we gotta lock down the planet. We gotta, military. By the time like Russia invaded Ukraine, I'm actually proud because I can look back at like the first podcast I did and I was like, this feels very eerily like COVID. I don't know where you, at the time, I was like, I don't know where Ukraine is. I don't know anything about it. I think Chernobyl was there, but I was like, it's the same playbook. At the same time, every media organ is going Slava Ukraini, Russia bad. And if you question it, you're evil. And I was like, well, this and what's happening, and we got to give all this money right now. You're like, I was like, I remember saying, I don't know what this psyop is, but I know it is a psyop. So I guess to kind of branch from there back to what I started with is just even for me personally, I would say that's maybe the starting point is understand they're trying to enslave and kill you. And then what to look for. Because you also don't want to go like spiral down into a black hole if everything's a psyop. So I would say, I don't know, when all the mainstream media outlets and institutions and agencies are saying the same thing, and then the follow up is that they need an unlimited blank check. I would say that's a psyop. You don't even need to know what the psyop is. You can say that's a psyop. What would you add to that thesis? I mean, and again, we're making this up, as we go. But what would you add to that? There's no right or wrong answer.
No, well, what I would add is that very often it serves the perpetrators of the psyops interest best to divide people up into two or more warring camps. And we see this all the time, and we know that this is how they operate. Some people talk about the Hegelian dialectic, where you start with a thesis and then you get a antithesis, then you get the thesis, and then you get the synthesis, which is what they were going for all along. And I think we see this a lot, where we're all commanded to rally behind one or the other movements, one or the other ideas, Republican, Democrat, Russia, Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. And very often, the Soviets were masters of this. They would actually lead their own opposition. Right? The best way to destroy the opposition is to lead the opposition. And so we see this a lot, and that makes it orders of magnitude more difficult to break free from the psyop, because here you have an opposition movement, or what you think is an opposition movement, but it really is being controlled by the same people who are running the psyop. And so I want to use war as an example, because in war you typically have two sides, sometimes more, but typically two general sides, the Allies and the Axis, whatever. And what you have very often is people behind the scenes who are using and manipulating both sides in that conflict. And I actually think we're seeing something like that as we speak right now. And part of the reason is that war serves the interests of this criminal cabal very well. And they've said so on paper in U.S. funded documents, U.S. government funded documents. They hired a guy, Lincoln Bloomfield, back in the early 1960s to come up with a report for the State Department. The title of the report was A World Effectively Controlled by the United Nations. And obviously the goal of the report was to figure out, how do we get to this world where the United Nations is effectively in charge? And the conclusion of this individual, who, by the way, was deeply involved in intelligence, he'd been involved with the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA. He was deeply involved with the Council on Foreign Relations, which I call deep state headquarters in the United States. He came up with a very simple and elegant solution. That was war, or at least the threat of war. And, he said that war is the fastest catalyst for accelerating this process of globalism, because it fundamentally destroys the old. It allows you to build a new. It puts people into a state of desperation where they're willing to accept
Hmm.
anything to make the conflict stop. And this is what we had actually seen. I mean, it wasn't that he discovered this. He simply identified it and put it on paper. We saw, for example, during World War II, which was the immediate context that these people had in mind. You had, if you read the book by Anthony Sutton, the historian from Stanford University, called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, you'll find that the Nazis were radically supported by some of the biggest forces on Wall Street.
By the home team. Where's the flag?
That's right. Yeah.
Home
And
team.
Senator Prescott Bush, as a director of Union Bank of New York, arrested
E.H.
under the Treasury
Harriman,
with the
Brown
enemy
Brothers,
gag.
Harriman. Yeah, all
That's
those
right. The
guys.
Rockefellers were
Dulles brothers. Hell,
mega financiers of the eugenics movement long before Adolf Hitler came on the scene and said, we needed an Ubermensch or whatever. These ideas were funded by the deep state here in the United States, the Rockefellers. And so what happened after World War II? Well, you ended up taking a giant leap forward for globalism. You built the United Nations, you built the World Bank, you built the International Monetary Fund, you built the nucleus of what eventually became the European Union. And so you could support the Nazis or you could support the Allies. And no matter which side you supported, we still ended up at the same place, a massive leap forward for globalism. The Nazis were incredibly evil. A lot of what the Allies did was also evil. And as I mentioned, a lot of the support for the Nazis was coming from some of the most powerful forces within the Allied countries. So, but if you pointed all that out, then somehow you were disloyal, somehow
yeah.
you were a bad American. And so here we had a really, really clear example of this dividing people up into two sides, clashing, and then the synthesis being the desired outcome from the beginning. So there are layers and layers and layers to these psyops that I think make it different. And sometimes you'll see people, I broke free from the psyop, so I've joined the opposition, not realizing that the opposition is also being led. And so what I would tell people is sometimes there are no good guys, right? Like you don't have to line up behind one or the other choices being offered to us by the power brokers.
Yeah, as the great comedian Tim Dillon says, looking at the world through the lens of Republican or Democrat is simply the shirking of the burden of independent thought. Meaning that, it's like I always use this example. It's like when you're little and you're, in the pool with your brothers or your cousins or something, you get flipped upside down and, you try to swim to the surface and to your panic, you realize you're swimming to the bottom of the pool and you don't know which way is up. If you ever can just like slow down and not freak out, if you just put your hand right above your nose and then exhale, if the bubbles hit your hand, you're facing up. If they don't, then you're facing the wrong way. You have to use your own critical, no one's around to save you. It's good if there is someone around to save you, but if there's not, you need to find out where to go. That's that's kind of how I view this one. It's, is the opposite side is I voted for Trump. I like Trump, but even I'm wary of like, yeah, the people who have like run the world, they're not stupid. They're evil, but they're not stupid. I can very well see a bunch of them pitting themselves behind Trump and being like, listen, you put your finger in the air. You can tell the winds are blowing to the right now. Like we can fight this endless, battle. They're all spineless. They don't care. They'll take off the globalist climate change mask and put on a MAGA hat. They don't care.
Right?
That's
That's so
why they're
true.
billionaires because they don't.
That's so true.
Like Zuckerberg didn't. It's not that Zuckerberg had a change of heart or didn't. It's that he doesn't have a heart, and he was just wearing a skin mask of Silicon Valley for 20 years, and then he ripped it off and said, "I'm an MMA bro." In 20 years, he'll rip that off and start speaking Mandarin. Like they don't care, which in some ways is actually kind of positive, because I'd much rather fight a spineless prostitute than a true believer. A true
Absolutely.
believer is going to go down, fight. They're going to go Japanese mainland, you know, run into suicide kamikaze. A spineless coward, though not great to have in your ranks when the going gets tough. But right now, I'm like, yeah, no, Zuckerberg's a spineless coward. That being said, if he's willfully, involuntarily coming to the right, the dude's worth, what, a quarter trillion dollars. He owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Yeah, use the asset. Don't purity spiral and say, well, he used to be a shut up. Don't do that. And so my point is so even when you see these oppositions, you go, well, is that real opposition or is it not? Well, first of all, it's a mixed it's chocolate you can't separate it. In any movement you find, no matter how genuine, maybe I'm naive. I think Trump genuinely means what he says. I think most of the
I
people in
agree.
his cabinet genuinely mean what he says. I would also bet my own life that he is surrounded by snakes and wolves in sheep clothing. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? Wouldn't be doing their job if they weren't doing if the I don't support it, but if the FBI and the CIA were not infiltrating every major terrorist group, domestic, international, I'd be like, you're not doing your job. Like you should be. So my point of saying all of this is back to the bubbles. Is like So then you can't where do you hang your hat? You can't go, well, I know for a fact these guys are legit. Well, you can hang your hat on God. You can hang your hat 999,000 times out of 100,000 or out of a million, your family. You have to think on your own. So you have to look at this and go, I think for it seems like Trump's genuine. There's probably a huge financial incentive for Elon, but I do believe he really thinks there's a civilizational divide. I think it's because he wants to get to Mars, but hey, that's fine. I'd rather that than a globalist who wants to kill us all. But I also go, but there's probably, as sure as the sun's going to rise tomorrow, it's probably completely infested with demons. So don't hang your hat on. Well, I want to hang my hat somewhere. Well, you want to shirk independent thought. And so what it really means is like you got to look at it and go, hey, that guy's probably on my side, but just always, just keep something in the back. If you ever see something that deviates from it, even if it's one or two interactions, or there are people I've had on the show where over the years, in the millions of words we've exchanged, there's just like a couple phrases they've said. And in my mind, I go, I don't know if that guy's bad, but I'm just gonna keep him at arm's length. I'll still have him on the show, but he's not my homie. I'm not inviting him over. Other people I've become great friends with. So how do you you can either cut yourself off from the world entirely and go live in a cave, which I mean, if you want, you can, but that's kind of seems like a waste of a life, and you're also not doing anything to help push a good world forward. I think you just have to understand that there is nowhere where you can ever go and then turn off your brain. You can't do that. And there are people who are banking on the fact that that's what you wanted. Vote blue no matter who, better red than that, whatever. That's what I would say. Is it's an uncomfortable truth. Like all things, how do you lose weight? You have to eat less and you have to be hungry. What's the I've been lifting weights for 20 years. What's the secret? There is nothing. No pain, no gain. Is that true? Yes. You should be in mental and physical anguish. Or you're not building. It's just what it is. So that's what I would say is yeah. Look for the marching orders. Look for the funding. Look for who's trying to enslave and kill you. And then understand that the opposite isn't by default your side either. Just find the good enough guys. I don't really know where I was going that with that. I was just kind of ranting for like 5 minutes. Sorry about
No, I agree with your assessment.
that.
And I think if you have core moral principles, that'll help guide you as well, right? Like, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. Like these are basic moral principles, and when you see somebody deviating significantly from those, that should be a really significant red flag. And also, you have to look at the tools that are used by these evildoers. Obviously, ignorance is a huge one, right? They want us as dumb as possible. They want us as uninformed as possible. That's why you could watch TV for 8 years straight and never get off your couch, and you'd be dumber than a box of rocks. You would know virtually nothing. You would have completely wasted 8 years of your life, and you might have gotten really riled up, but you actually didn't learn anything. And when you look at the public school system, this is actually being drilled into the minds of children. They're not being taught how to reason. They're not being taught the rules of logic. They're not being taught historical facts. They're being conditioned like a circus animal to have a certain emotional response to particular buzzwords, ideas, and that's a huge red flag. So we need to recognize ignorance is always and everywhere an enemy of humanity. This ridiculous cliche that ignorance is somehow bliss. Oh, if I just stay totally ignorant, life's going to be great. That's the dumbest thing in the world, right? Ignorance might eventually cost you not just your freedom and your family, but even your life. So ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is a terrible, terrible thing. And go look at people who live lives of ignorance. They're easy to manipulate. They're easy to rip off. They're usually miserable, and unfortunately, they never accomplish anything significant in life for themselves or for anyone else. So, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is an enemy to be defeated by educating ourselves and learning how to think. Secondly, fear. And that one's a little bit more difficult to tackle because there's something in us that naturally feels fear. And I think there's an appropriate place for fear. If somebody's holding a gun to your head, right, that's a reasonable response to have. The problem with fear is that it is being deliberately fomented. We're being deliberately encouraged to be fearful, not because we should be fearful of some particular thing, but because it really makes us liable to make dumb decisions. Decisions that we never would have made if we had had the opportunity to calmly and rationally consider what was actually being presented to us. Like, hey, we're going to lock everybody in their houses and see if we can stop the COVID that way. Like, people are so scared. They're like, oh, okay, whatever you say, I don't want to die. Whatever it takes, 2 weeks to slow the spread. And these people, if they had been thinking rationally for a minute, they would have said, wait a minute here. Lock me in my house? Wait, yeah, but like you mean I can't go to work? I can't go see my family? Like what? And they never would have accepted that. So we need to consciously understand and consciously struggle to reject decision making from a place of fear and to actually think about things calmly and rationally. Because when we make decisions out of fear, we are very, very likely to make dumb decisions that we would not have made under normal circumstances.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's again, the easiest thing is to slide into the fear.
Hmm.
Like that's again, it's the path of least resistance. It they're awful people, but they do have like entropy and enthalpy and Newton's laws and the laws of thermodynamics. They do have those on their side. It's the easiest thing to go, well, it says be scared. But you can't yet again, and it's the burden of independent thought, but the burden of independent thought, like getting up early or going to the gym or dieting or all the things that suck in the moment, you're happy you did eventually, right? Saving money, there's nothing sexy about it until, something happens and you go, thank God I've got a little bit of like a cushion. It's the independent thought. And I think, and I know I got to let you go, but it's like the perfect example right now would be the how convenient that out of nowhere every day they're like an asteroid's coming. Have you seen this? Where like it's coming to the United States, and it's the chance of impact has gone up from 1.4 to 1.5. And every day, NASA just bumps. We've never seen this in our lives. There's no brand new. It's not like we just invented a telescope and maybe we're a bit like skittish. Like, man, there's a lot of shit out there. No, like nothing aside from I don't know a president that they don't like. And every day it's just that this one's coming, and you see people on Twitter like, "Oh man, I've never seen something like this in my life." Like, "Oof, we better, it's like we better what? We better what? Be scared?
Except a one world government.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Man, that asteroid's coming. What's the solution? Well, I think if my kids mutilate their genitals, it's like,
Right.
dude, this is.
Hmm.
You can't look at like people in the Old Testament and be like, those idiots thought building a golden calf would, and then turn around and be like, all right, Timmy, I got the hatchet. Like, we got to stop climate change. Like, take your pants off. Like, it doesn't. So that's what I would say is anyone using fear to get you to do something, hey, they're not on your side. They're not on the exception of like your parents saying you'll thank me when you're older. That's an exception. Anyone else trying to use fear or manipulate you, hey, man. It's not that's not how it goes. If you're on a first date and you're both having a good time, that's love. If you're in an interrogation room and they're trying to good cop, bad cop, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they maybe don't have your best interests in mind. So that's what I would say is if somebody's maneuvering from a point of fear, they probably, I don't know, want to enslave and kill you. But I know I have to let you go at 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes. So, dude, I'd love to have you on again sometime and shoot the shit. That was awesome.
Would love to do it. Thank you so much, Tommy. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. And thanks for what you're doing. Let's talk
Yeah,
soon.
man. You as well. That was fun.
All
Thank you.
right.
All right,
Take
guys.
care,
Thank
man.
you so much for watching. You too.